It's time for Bringing the Heat with Bryan Nolen.
All right, what is going on, ladies and gentlemen? It is another edition of Bringing the Heat with Bryan Nolen. Bryan Nolen here with you on this week's edition of the program. One of the greatest finishes we've ever seen at Atlanta happened on Sunday, and the guy that was there, Mr. Steven Stump, he is going to be co-hosting with me to recap it all, and then the guy that was on the call for PRN, the Performance Racing Network, Mr. Doug Rice. He's going to come on. We're going to be talking about his career, why he is hanging up the headset now after 36 years, what it was like with him being the Grand Marshal, and so much more. So without further ado, let's dive on into the Inferno and catch up with the voice of PRN, Mr. Doug Rice.
Now it's time for...
Joining us up here in the broadcast booth, a longtime friend of ours and an even longer friend of you, race fans and race listeners of the Performance Racing Network, the lead anchor, Doug Rice. After 36 years of broadcasting, he's determined that this will be his last year.
To go into the Inferno with Bryan.
Right now, folks, at this time, I'm going to bring into the program Doug's last lap, 36 years in the broadcast booth. You've heard this guy call a plethora of races. He got to do something really cool a couple weeks ago calling the Daytona 500. You can hear him on PRN. You heard him last week at Atlanta. You're going to hear him this week in Las Vegas. Doug Rice from PRN joined the program. Doug, thank you so much for coming on the program, and we got a lot to talk about. Are you ready for this, my friend?
I think so, Brian. I'm always ready to talk a little racing.
I love it. Now, first and foremost, before we talk about stuff on the track, let's talk about some stuff off the track. You made some news I think before the year even started, that you're going to be hanging it up after 36 years. Why now? Why hang it up and retire now? And then, did you always have this specific year, 2024, as you were always going to call it a career?
No, but I had a mental timeline of when I thought it would be time to step away from the vast majority of this, and things just sort of fell into place. As you pointed out, I've done this a long time, 36 years when we wrap up this year, and you want to do something fresh with your life. And so there are things that I want to do that I cannot do if I'm tied going to a racetrack almost every other week and spending 3 days at a time. Last year, I spent 100 days in hotel rooms. I would prefer not to do that anymore. I love this job. It is a great job. I have a passion for it, but there are just things that I want to do. There are things that my wife and I want to do together that we simply can't do if I keep doing this.
For those that don't know, I was looking a little bit about just how you got started, but for those that don't know, how did you get your start in this business?
I've always loved radio. I went to Appalachian State, studied broadcasting and radio there, and did a lot of public speaking, which I honestly think is a better avenue to learn how to do this than just being on the radio. If you can public speak, you can do a lot of things. And worked in local radio for about 10 years, was around racing, didn't know that racing was what I wanted to do. Was PA at a dirt track near Winston-Salem for 2 or 3 seasons, 1/8 of a mile dirt track with about 30 go-karts on it, which is a lot harder to call than a great big track with big cars and big numbers. And one thing led to another, got hired by PRN in 1988, got on the air in 1992, and have hung around on the air since then. And it's been a wonderful ride, but it's a progression. And I get that a lot. You have to start at a beginning point that is nothing like the end point. You know, calling an 1/8 of a mile dirt track. And then I spent several years working with Mark Garrow covering the Busch Series on Capital Radio Network. We did all the Busch races that the Motor Racing Network didn't cover, all the small tracks, South Boston, and Pulaski, and Myrtle Beach, and things of that nature. So we did a lot of that. And then opportunities and being persistent allowed me to wind up where I've been the last 35 years.
Doug Rice from PRN at RiceMan61 on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, joins the program. Doug, I was reading on the press release from the Atlanta Motor Speedway that you've called play-by-play on 210 NASCAR Cup Series races. where does the finish of Sunday's race rank among those races?
Well, it's right up there. I thought Blaney had won the thing, to be honest. And then a nanosecond later, it flashes up that it's Daniel Suarez. It was a great race. It wasn't just a great finish, though. It was a great race from start to finish. So I don't think we should lose track of that fact, too. It was a marvelous race. It was a good shot in the arm for NASCAR coming off what I thought was kind of a ho-hum Daytona, to be honest.
I just want to talk about the day in general because for those that don't know, Doug was the Grand Marshal for the Am Better Health 400 in Atlanta. Just how did that come to be? And then what did that mean to you professionally as well as personally?
Well, that's pretty cool. They had a little press conference in the media center, which people actually asked me questions. I was kind of stunned that folks had enough interest in what I'd been doing to ask questions. I got to sit into the driver's meeting. And we can let you hear what the command sounded like.
And now, here to say the most famous words in motorsports, please welcome 35-year lead anchor for the Performance Racing Network, entering his final season behind the mic, Doug Rice.
To all the race fans who have ever listened to NASCAR on the radio, thank you. Thank you very much. Drivers, start your engines!
The command has been given. Let's crack him up.
So there you go.
That was awesome. So good.
Thank you. I had a lot of fun doing that. I didn't exactly know how it was going to come out, but it came out to where I really liked it. And having to follow the Rock from Daytona, that's a lot. So I was happy with that. Was a little bit nervous doing it, but that's another one of those. I don't use the term bucket list, but I like to check boxes. MRN let me come on the Daytona 500 the week before for a few laps, and you get to do this. And those are two big things in the sport that I've gotten to do as a result of announcing that I was retiring.
I want to talk about that because that was actually going to be my next question, Doug. You got to do something really special, and that was called part of the Daytona 500 for MRN. Obviously, they do the race that PRN doesn't, and so on and so forth. Just how did that come about, and then what did that really mean to you?
Well, how it came about is I made no secret at all when I announced my retirement. Boy, it would be nice if I got to do a few laps. And they knew that. They already knew that. And talked to management. Two of the guys from MRN took me out to lunch, asked me if I wanted to do it. I didn't have to think very long to say yes. And I know all the announcers and pretty much everybody that works at Motor Racing Network because we overlap sometimes. We're at the same tracks, we're at the same press conferences, and I'm good friends with them. Work with a lot of them on Sirius XM NASCAR radio when we do things. Done shows with Moody and Bagley and a host of others, and they were wonderfully kind to me. Very nice, very welcoming, excited that I got to do this. It meant a lot. I mean, that is the penultimate race in NASCAR, and I had never called it on radio. I did a couple of races back when we had the NASCAR Hot Pass on DirecTV, but you're only focused on one driver. And to be able to say, with clean conscience, yes, I broadcast the Daytona 500. That means a lot. I mean, that's the biggest race we have. So I feel like I've touched them all. I've done the Coke 600, the Brickyard, the Indianapolis 500, and now the Daytona 500. So it was a great experience, and I will always be appreciative of the guys at MRN for letting me do that.
Man, we are in sync, Doug, because for the third question in a row, at the very end of your answer is going to be for my next question. You mentioned the Indy 500. I got to ask about 2015. Became the first and currently the only broadcaster to call the Indy 500 and the Coke 600 in the same day. Just what do you remember most about that day in particular?
It was awesome. We've been in Indy for 3 days. I was accompanied up there by Alexis Erickson, who works at PRN, to kind of document it for social, because you almost need another person. And we were having a grand time, and I was doing I'd covered IndyCar racing before. Back in the early 2000s, I was on IMS radio for probably 10 races a year and had been around it, but hadn't been around it in a long time. So I did a crash course, so to speak, on IndyCars. And the beauty of it is, and I was working pits, an IndyCar pit stop's like 7 seconds. So there's not much to say. They're in, they're gone. Boom. So that was good. Listening on the radio, hearing about the wing adjustments and things like that. The whole experience of just being at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway for an Indy 500 event with the Purdue Marching Band, the balloon release, the back home again in Indiana, that's all really moving. That's just wonderful. And this was put on by the folks at Shale. There was a lady named she still is, named Heidi Massey-Bong that put this together as a promotion for Shale. I did some of Elio's pit stops until they moved me down to Juan Pablo, who actually went on to win the race. And then they had a private aircraft waiting on us to whisk us back down here to Charlotte and, anchored the Coca-Cola 600, which was won by Carl Edwards that day. And as you pointed out, the only broadcaster to have ever done that, to work both races in the same day. I'm proud of that. I'm happy to say that.
I love it. I think that is really, really cool. And let's dive on into back on track. Last thing before we let you go, Doug. Last but not least, this weekend, Vegas. People are calling it, so to speak, the first true, real race of the season. Obviously, you got the two wild cards with Daytona and Atlanta. What are you going to be keeping your eye on this weekend in Sin City and then throughout the 2024 NASCAR season?
Well, I'll be at the roulette table for Friday. So Saturday, they all seem to have a really good Xfinity race there. And if you remember the last time we went out there, Riley Herbst finally got hooked up and drove away and won by like 10 seconds or something. On Sunday, I'm curious to see about some of these guys that have had bad races to start. Denny Hamlin's been slow getting out of the box. Joey Logano, Brad Keselowski, can they turn it around? They don't have to win, but you cannot have 3 races in a row where you're finishing that far back in the pack. So I'm really curious to see what they're going to do. And I'm also looking at the front row motorsports cars, Todd Gilliland and Michael McDowell. They had a lot of speed in Atlanta. They had a lot of speed in Daytona. Can they transmit that speed to the racetrack in Las Vegas? I think those are a couple of the stories that I'll be looking.
Doug and the crew will get it started for you Saturday with Cup Series practice and qualifying. You got the Xfinity race later that afternoon. And then the Pennzoil 400, Sunday, March the 3rd. You can catch Doug and his team on PRN, the Performance Racing Network. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, Mr. Doug Rice. Thank you so much. And I'm looking forward to actually getting to meet you in person this weekend. And once again, just thanks for the time and congrats on it. On an incredible career.
Make your way up to the broadcast booth.
Perfect. I definitely will. Thank you so much, Doug, and I'll see you this weekend.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Doug Rice, the play-by-play man for the Performance Racing Network, joins Bringing the Heat. Once again, that was Mr. Doug Rice. Incredible conversation, and really, really enjoyed that. Once again, at RiceMan61. Let's go on into what is still hot and catch up on the latest news and notes in the NASCAR world.
What's still hot? It's time to upgrade you on the latest news in NASCAR.
All right, I'm going to bring in my co-host at Steven_Stump, lover of all things statistics, as well as reporter. He was on the ground with Tanner Marlar and Brad Harrison. Steven, have you ever seen a finish as well as the one that we saw on Sunday? And then when it's all said and done, 5-10 years down the road, where does this one rank and will rank?
In terms of finishes I've seen live, either on TV or in person, no. I've never had anything come close to this. And just watching it, I was in the media center for the final lap. Just watching it was insane because it looked like Blaney was kind of just going to keep everyone behind him and then sail the checkered flag. But then Kyle Busch managed to get the run to the middle. He had Suarez on the outside. And then through turn 4, they were all side by side by side. And I was like, holy cow, is this really going to happen? And actually, it was so close that they came to the end that I actually thought Blaney won. And I think there was a lot of people, too. Even Clint Boyer said that on the broadcast. They thought it was Blaney. But it was Suarez that won. It was, incredible finish. And I think it's a finish that went viral just beyond the NASCAR circle, too. And I think part of the reason why is because even there's people that may not know NASCAR or may not know auto racing, but there are plenty of people that know the 2006 movie Cars. And if you remember the movie Cars, early on in the race, in the movie, there was a 3-way tie with Lightning McQueen sticking his tongue out, and that almost perfectly matched to a T with the finish we saw at Atlanta, with all 3 cars almost in a dead heat coming to the finish. So when I think about 5 to 10 years, I think this is going to rank probably in the top 5, and I think it's still going to be one that we're going to bring up, remember, and see clips of on social media for a long, long time.
Yeah, even Doug Rice said in our interview that he did not know who won at first, and I mean, it just an incredible finish. I mean, still looking at the replay, it is so close, and we're gonna think back 10, 15 years down the road, and we're gonna be like, man, this is our generation's Kurt Busch, Ricky Craven from Darlington back in the day. So this is our Craven Busch moment, and it's awesome to see. This is what they needed after wasn't a lackluster Daytona 500, but it wasn't just like the best Daytona 500 in all of the Daytona 500s. So really happy to see the finish. Great win for Daniel Suarez. And Steven, last thing here on the what is still hot for Daniel Suarez. How big of a boost was this for him? And then does this basically save his spot at Trackhouse?
It's a huge win for him because if you think about it, his last win was Sonoma in 2022. He dominated, but last year was a rough season. Didn't win a race, missed the playoffs, all while Ross Chastain in 2022 finished runner-up in the title and won a total of 4 races. So I think it's a big shot in the arm, especially since the team had some struggles. And when you look at Trackhouse, you have Ross Chastain, and then you have Zane Smith currently on loan to Spire. You have Shane Van Gisbergen in a developmental deal with the team running for Kaulig and Xfinity and Cup. And then you also have Connor Zilic as well. So that's a pretty star-studded big name list. And, there's only so many seats at the team. So I do think the seat was a little hot for Suarez, but, fortunately for him, I think that win pretty much eases all of that. I think he's going to be with Trackhouse for quite a while now.
Let's dive on into the soundbite of the week and catch up with a pretty vocal Mr. Josh Williams.
Well, Tony, what angered you at the end of the race? What did you take issue with?
What the hell do you think I was mad about? Dumb little runs us clear down to the infield. He wants to about everybody else, and he's the one that drives like a little I'm going to bust his ass.
Thanks, Tony.
Thank you.
And short track racing.
It's time for the sound bites of the week.
I thought I left the ARCA series a long time ago, but apparently not. This is supposed to be cup racing, but man, it's just insane. I had like 5 guys pass me while we're still wrecking. It's like lap 1. So I don't know. It's just unfortunate. I don't know. I got some bad luck. I need to figure out how to get rid of this somehow.
Is there anything more you could have done?
No, you just wait till somebody runs into you, I guess.
With Daytona, Atlanta back-to-back, just how frustrating is it to get this start of the year, especially with how big of a year it is for you?
Yeah, I mean, it sucks, but I don't know. There's a race next weekend, so maybe we'll have better luck there.
When else will we see you in the Cup Series?
I'm not sure. I got a couple scheduled throughout the year, so hopefully it's not at a track like this. Hopefully it's somewhere where talents mean something.
Steven, when I listen to that, I think half it is him just being frustrated with the result, and then half it's just him just being frustrated in the moment, because I don't feel like he feels that way, him being the ARCA comparison. I mean, look at his Xfinity and then look at the Cup. They're almost identical, and he's had, 4 bad races to start the season in as many races as he's running. I mean, it's just been absolutely abysmal. I mean, I feel for the guy. I really feel for the guy. But I mean, I do think I do disagree with the notion that they were acting like the ARCA series. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I will agree that comparing the Cup Series to ARCA is a little over the top. But at the same time, I do somewhat understand his frustration, given just how often these super speedway races can just turn into a mess. Usually it's at the very end of the race, not the very beginning. But for example, while the Daytona 500 itself, I thought was a fine race, I think a lot of the frustration stemmed from the fact that there was a wreck entering the final lap and it ended under caution. Again, for the 4th time in 5 years, the Daytona 500 ended under yellow, all because drivers could not keep their cars straight. So I do think there are moments when on these super speedways, Daytona, Talladega, Atlanta, where the driving isn't the brightest, but I don't think it's nowhere near, ARCA and so on. And although there was some attrition this weekend, I think, beyond after that, I think there was also tons of brilliant, genius racing too, especially in the final laps.
Let's dive on into some final thoughts and wrap up this program.
It's going to be a drag race all the way back to the start-finish line. No caution. They're side by side, right to the line. Big crash. Here they come. Checkered flag.
The checkered flag is out, and it's time for the final thoughts.
Final thoughts are in the air. Whatever you want to rant, rave, or anything in between. Mr. Steven Stump, the knower of all statistics, the floor is yours, my friend.
Las Vegas is an important race, not only because it's the first, non-drafting race of the season, but it's an intermediate track. And if you look at the past results of Las Vegas in the winners, most of the winners in the Cup race ended up going on to do great things that season. If you look at 2023, we had William Byron win in the spring, and he went on to win a season-high 6 races, make the championship 4. If we look in the fall, it was Kyle Larson who won. He won 4 races, the second most in the series, and he also made the championship 4. If we go back to 2022, it was in the fall. It was eventual champion Joey Logano winning there, his 3rd of 4 wins. If we go back to 2021, it was Kyle Larson winning the first one. He won 10 races that year. And in the fall there was Denny Hamlin, who won 2, but it was arguably Larson's closest challenger all year. So, 1.5-mile tracks aren't as important as they used to be. They're not as numerous as they used to be. But Las Vegas and tracks like that are a true test of team power, horsepower, and driver skill all at the same time. So look out for whoever wins on Sunday or who runs well on Sunday, because the odds are they're going to be in store for a pretty big year.
For me, I'm going to be keeping an eye out on 2 guys in particular this Sunday from one team. That is Front Row Motorsports. Todd Gilliland and Michael McDowell. For the past 2 weeks, Michael McDowell sat on the front row. And this past Sunday, it was realistic that Todd Gilliland could have won that race. Now, ultimately, he was caught up in a wreck in which we were synonymous with super speedway racing and did not get the finish he ultimately deserved. I do feel like something is changing in the waters with Bob Jenkins, the Front Row Motorsports. They got the backing of Ford. We've learned with that. I feel like they are going to become a step up, and they are no longer an underdog team. They're a team that can compete on the short tracks, on the road courses, on the super speedways, and now on the mile-and-a-halves. If they are to put their money where my mouth currently is, they will be running up front, not in the top 15. They'll be running top 5s and top 10s throughout. And you never know what can happen on a late race restart. But on Sunday, I'm going to be keeping my eye on 2 guys in particular, Todd Gilliland and Mr. Michael McDowell.
Good picks.
Thank you, buddy. Last but not least, Mr. Steven Stump, what are you going to be keeping your eye on for the races in Las Vegas, and then promote what you are going to be cooking up on frontstretch.com? And then you got a pretty cool piece coming out. By the time this podcast is out, it will already be out. So promote that piece as well, buddy.
That's correct. Obviously, Las Vegas, again, like I said, I'll be keeping an eye out on whoever the winner, who runs well, front row, and so on. As for stuff I'm working on, I have my usual 2 weekly columns. We got four burning questions, and we got stat sheet. Those come out Friday morning and Tuesday morning, respectively. But what I'm working on right now, and what will be posted, and I'm very excited to share, is a special commentary piece dedicated to the history of racing on February 29th.
Oh.
Today is February 28th. It is tomorrow is Leap Day. It only comes around once every 4 years. And that means that with how uncommon it is, it's also very uncommon to have a race on that day. But there have been some times in NASCAR, IndyCar, and other series' history where there were races run on February 29th. So I recap those races, what happened, and I also look at drivers born on February 29th, and their accomplishments as well. So for a pretty special day, there's a pretty special piece that I'm going to be sharing tomorrow, and I hope you guys enjoyed it just as much as I did writing it.
I know I'm going to be keeping my eye on with that piece. Once again, leap year, February the 29th. I think this may be the only podcast that has come out on a leap year since the Front Stretch Podcast Networks have debuted. Trey, you want to pop in here and agree with that statement? Is that correct? You don't know? Okay, you're not even popping in. What podcast manager are you? Come on, Trey. But no. In all seriously, Steven does a great job with the stats. Like I tell everybody, there's no person in the world that knows more stats than Mr. Steven Stump. For all of those stats, at Steven_Stump, Trey Lau VT, and then at the Bryan Nolen. Next week on the program is going to be an incredible guest. I cannot tell you who it is yet, but it is going to be very, very exciting. So make sure you click the Front Stretch Podcast Network and subscribe to all of our podcasts. Through the Gears, we got a new host in Tino who does a great job. Stock Car Scoop every Sunday with Mr. Adam Cheekies. And then we got Happy Hour with my man, Mr. Trey Lyle, Michael Massey, Caleb Barnes. I think he's going to be coming on almost full-time. Trey, is that maybe mostly full-time, 3/4 part? We'll see. He'll pop on occasionally, more often than not, as well as check out our YouTube channel, youtube.com/frontstretch. Once again, youtube.com/frontstretch. For Steven Stump, Trey Lyle, I am Bryan Timothy Nolen. Thank you so much for joining me. Steven, anything last you want to contribute, buddy?
I think I don't have too much more. Just the season's here, and I'm very excited to see where everyone stacks up heading into Sin City.
Perfect. For Steven Stump, Trey Lau, I am Bryan Nolen. Thank you so much for joining us. Talk with you next week.
This is Austin Dillon, driver of the Bass Pro Shops Chevrolet. Make sure to hit that subscribe button. Also check out one of those 2 videos beside me. Visit frontstretch.com for more racing content.